Joining us today as we take a look at another film from NorthWestFest is Alexander Greer, the producer, and Joe Saunders, the director and editor of the documentary The Penny Black. It's playing, of course, as part of NorthWestFest from Thursday, May 6th until Sunday, May 16th. You can stream it at northwestfest.ca, as you can with all the films that are part of the festival. Alex and Joe, you guys found a way to make stamp collection and a Russian neighbor somehow connect, and really quite fascinating. It's a leap. People might be like, how is this possible? Give the audience a little bit of a taste of the plot of The Penny Black before we start to dive into it.
Sure. It's a documentary about a millennial who is left with a $1 million stamp collection from a neighbor he doesn't know. The only thing he knows of him is he's Russian, and he drinks a lot, and gives him this $1 million stamp collection, asks him to hold it for 2 weeks while he goes out of town, and the guy never came back. And we started shooting, I think, after 1 week. Is that right, Alex?
Yeah.
Will told us this story. He's a friend of a friend, and he happened to be telling the table this crazy thing that happened to him last week. And Alex and I were just finishing up another documentary, and we were kind of in that mode. So I was just like, hey, do you mind if we come over and start filming? Thinking this guy was coming back in a week, and it would just be this kind of very odd short film about strange things that happen in Los Angeles. And the guy never came back. So we just kept filming. And the story just kept evolving and kept providing us very strange twists and turns, and the layers of Will himself, our protagonist / antagonist, started kind of unraveling and revealing different parts of his personality that were interesting and played well into the narrative that we were shaping. I mean, it was a crazy experience, and I'm glad that NorthWestFest is picking it up to show some more people.
Now, you talk about the fact that you were introduced to Will by Alex, and at first this is just supposed to be, a short film about an interesting little strange story, but this morphs into what you've labeled it as a documentary noir, and it's quite apt in this description. Plus, there's like recreation moments as well, like a little tinge of Errol Morris. I thought it was really interesting the way that when I read about it, how that idea had evolved, right? Can you tell us about those moments where the film starts to grow and kind of get a life of its own beyond that initial idea? And maybe describe to the audience as well, too, a little bit about how you approached the evolution of that kind of visual concept of it as well.
Sure. It was, documentaries are made in many different ways, obviously, but traditionally, there's some kind of event or moment that happens, and you try and recreate that with interviews of people who were there or firsthand accounts. It's kind of the traditional documentary. You get interviews and you do recreations and stuff. This was a different beast because we were watching the story unfold as we were going. So we had no idea how it was going to end up. And there were a couple times in the filming of this that we kind of said, this isn't going anywhere, and we kind of dropped it. And then something would happen and we'd pick it back up. So trying to plan it out stylistically was a little difficult because we didn't really know the story we were telling, but we did know it was mysterious. And that was the thing that kept pulling Alex and I back in, there were so many questions that were really intriguing. So we knew we had a bit of a mystery. And we did notice at one point that we were shooting mostly at night, and that was a lot to do with scheduling because we all had day jobs and we were only able to wrangle Will at night after work. So we noticed that we were shooting always at night, and we were shooting a mystery. And then we started talking about film noir and the films that Alex and I love. And, they all happened to be, or many of them happened to be in Los Angeles. And we were like, wow, we're shooting this landscape. We have this great story. Let's lean into it. And so we started then planning to shoot at night. And then, of course, in the editing of this, and I should add that Alex was also co-editor on this, we were definitely looking at those kind of stereotypical noir moments and seeing how we could play with those and modernize those, and including music and editing and stuff like that. Alex, do you have anything to add? I know you're you were a big part in that, shaping it as a noir.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's an excellent question of when we realized that we were shooting a noir. Because you know, and like in the original noirs, nobody ever knew that they were shooting a noir. Like nobody set out to make a noir in the original run of noirs. It's funny that we fell into that same sort of um, reality. But yeah, it was just something that evolved out of necessity. I mean, so much of this movie is things that evolved out of necessity. Like the lo-fi aesthetic is something that very much evolved out of necessity. It ended up becoming, I think, a quiver, or you know, an arrow for us to use, because the film is so unbelievable in a lot of regards, that it helps that we're shooting on handheld, and it helps that we're shooting without any, you know, light sources. But that was not planned. We just didn't really have much else to shoot on. Was the problem.
Well, one of the most interesting things about this too is, you know, we've only really kind of just briefly referred to Will, but you know, a lot of this focuses around him and obviously the stamp collection and the mysterious Russian neighbor. But his past and his estranged father, who he describes as a sociopathic liar, and just how that's affected him. And I guess that's just a tip of so many things that kind of evolve in this story that make it fascinating. Were there ever moments when you felt like this project may not quite be going anywhere? And when were those moments that you felt like the story was maybe giving even beyond what you were looking for? Or did that just make it even more exciting, where you were like, because you've already mentioned a few times, you're like, you got Godfather 3'd and you thought you were out, but they pulled you right back in. You know, what was those moments where you were just like, man, I wish I could quit this, but we can't?
Yeah, I mean, it was really relying on a couple things. Like you know, we knew we had a storyline if we could find the Russian neighbor. If we couldn't find the Russian neighbor, which seemed very plausible at the time, then we would try and make the movie more about Will and his dad, because it is about Will and his dad, really. And you know, his dad was a con man, and I think there was this struggle going on in Will's mind about trying to avoid, you know, falling into his father's footsteps. But can we avoid that, is kind of the question that we played with a lot. Like, is he destined to repeat the sins of his father despite hating his father for his sins? And so that was a strong storyline. And we figured, you know, if we couldn't find the Russian neighbor, perhaps we could find his dad and talk to his dad and like flush that story out some more. But Will made it clear to us that we were not allowed to do that. And if we did that, his cooperation would be lost. So there were many times in this where, yeah, we just said, listen, there's no way we're going to find this guy. We had a private investigator looking for him, multiple, I should say. And we talked to the police, you know, on a couple different occasions. There was just, you know, he turns out, if you don't want to be found, it's actually, you're actually able to do it. Like, despite the internet and like, you know, people, you know, tracking you all the time on Amazon and whatever, like people can just disappear. And so, yeah, there were times where we just thought, well, this was fun. And, you know, let's do other things. But
yeah, we had a board in our office that had like every possible avenue that we thought could unfold from the story that we were working in at the time, and without variance, like we would always come upon a different avenue that we had never expected would happen. Like, we had backup plans on backup plans on backup plans for where we thought the story would go, and it was constantly evading us, and that like worked to our advantage sometimes and it worked to our disadvantage other times. So to get back to your original question of like, did we ever think that this story was like not going anywhere? Yeah, there were a lot of really low moments over the course of, you know, what, 6 years of filming, where we were like, this is done. We've gotten all the raw material we're going to be able to get. Let's figure out how to craft a story out of what we have. Let's figure out how to compromise and make, you know, a narrative thread actually work here. And as soon as we would settle into that sort of complacency or resignation, like inevitably some weird twist out of left field, like as far left field as like nightmares of murdering sisters from Hawaii would come out of nowhere and like reignite the story and send it back in a different direction. So it was a ride. It was just a ride.
What Alex is referring to actually happened. I mean, there were multiple times, that being one of them. Bonnie Collins, who is the woman who lives in near Joshua Tree, and she had a relative who had $1 million stamp collection stolen, and she believed he was murdered. She's a character in the documentary, and we found her because her sister called us out of fear of being discovered by her sister, and there was just, and you know, that part's not in the documentary because we weren't. She didn't give us permission to use the call, but yeah, there was just lots of stuff like that. You know, we put ourselves out there as much as we could, and you know, strange stuff happened.
I mean, the most tangible moment of that happening, I should share the anecdote quickly, is we had given up trying to find Roman at a certain point, and there was a brief moment in the production of this story where it almost became a TV series, and so we were shooting some recreations for that potential avenue, and we had this big outdoor shoot going in Burbank where we were recreating Will's apartment. And doing some recreations of the handoff when Roman gave him the stamps, and it was a big shoot. We set up a lot of stuff with it, and for the first time in like I think like a 4 or 5 year drought in Los Angeles, we got totally rained out and lost the ability to like get any of the shots that we needed. And we'd also ran out of money at that point because we had, you know, wisely spent it all on this outdoor shoot. And so we decided we needed to get what we could, so we would do a guerrilla style shoot and steal some shots from Will's actual apartment and just go grab some exteriors. And when we went to Will's actual apartment, one of his neighbors came out and asked what we were doing, and we told him about the story. And this was when we had totally given up on trying to find Roman. We had no idea where he was. Our private investigators weren't turning up any information. And this neighbor said, "Oh, Roman? Yeah, I've seen him like a block away. He's smoking cigarettes outside all the time." And that, you know, reignited an entire new thread in the story where we then
spoilers. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
But yeah, we just kept getting dragged back in. Totally unexpectedly.
So, you mean you both kind of talked about how meticulous you were about trying to figure out what's our next step, where could this potentially be going, how do we make this work, right? Did all those challenges that you've just talked about and you faced kind of in the process of filming it, did that make editing even more difficult together, or did you find all that kind of planning helped you map it out even stronger?
I mean, I think when we went in to edit this, we went in to recreate as best we could the feeling that Alex and I had during the course of this production. You know, at least the more thrilling moments, right? You know, you take 5 years, you condense it down into 90 minutes, and you have, you know, a couple of thrilling moments. You end up with a really decent, fun, engaging 90 minutes. And so we were very aware of the moments that thrilled us the most. And it was just a matter of placing those in the story and making sure it made sense, like to watch it all the way through. And there weren't, you know, I think we did a pretty good job of explaining everything. There are probably some questions that the viewer is left with at the end, which is why these Q&As are always a little helpful. But yeah, I think our goal was to recreate as best we could our experience of this ride, and I think we did a good job of that.
Yeah, it was definitely difficult to do though, because our experience with this ride was so circuitous. So, you know, we definitely, there's a million different stories that can be told with the footage that we have. I mean, we have hundreds of hours of footage that we shot, and there's a million different stories in it. And so figuring out how to reprogram the path that we mentally went down over the course of, you know, the 6 years of shooting was not easy. Definitely not easy. Trying to make sense of the chaos, I guess.
Yeah, and just and you know, you get yourself into a place of like, You know, there's scenes that you really want to put in there, and you know, that make a lot of sense to be in the film, but you can't make a film that's, you know, 100. You can't make a documentary that's 120 minutes because nobody will buy it or watch it. So trying to pull those out was difficult, but our kind of guiding light was always like, you know, is this honest to how we felt about the documentary? Because there were some more informational scenes, I guess you can call them, that we had in there, and inevitably we took a lot of those out because it wasn't as, like, you know, emotional, or didn't resonate as the other scenes did.
There was an interview that you were doing to kind of generate press for this, where Alex had said, Joe and I, in our filmic approach, are generally drawn to things that are interesting and a little extreme. So in The Penny Black, you're dressing incognito, you're hiring bodyguards and private investigators, and you also take out insurance that covered anyone stabbing you potentially while you were shooting. So is this just how you guys live? Are you on the edge, or do you kind of look at it as like, well, whatever it takes to get the story done?
Yeah, stabbing insurance. That was definitely a day that my parents were very disappointed in me. Or not disappointed, but just fearful. Joe and I created a mantra at a certain point filming this movie, where we decided that if we were terrifying our parents, then we were probably, you know, capturing something good that would translate well into a story for people. I don't know, Joe. Do we just follow unnecessarily interesting, dangerous stuff, or was there a better hook here?
No, I think, I mean, this certainly didn't start as well. It did start as something that could be potentially dangerous, and I think that is the exciting thing about, like, if you were just to throw the log line out, $1 million stamp collection, shady Russian neighbor, and the son of a con man, like, all of that is kind of this, like, fun chemistry of danger and intrigue, and yeah, and I think chasing that was a lot of fun. But, you know, I think Alex and I have a unique ability to put blinders on in dangerous situations, because and I know, Alex, you mentioned this in a completely different scenario, but yeah, Alex and I can kind of charge into something without really thinking too hard about the jeopardy we're putting ourselves in. I think that's our gift as filmmakers. We kind of, you know, I think many people would say, you know, I'm not comfortable with this. And Alex and I don't even really give it much thought. We just kind of do it. Another example of that is this other show that we do, Alex is the host of. It's called The Traffic Show. And Alex plays the host of a talk show that happens in strangers' cars. So he flags down strangers on the 405 in Los Angeles during rush hour, gets in their car, puts up GoPros, and does a talk show in their car. And some of those episodes are terrifying, because the people, although they let them in, were not as affable when Alex got in the car, or realized they made a terrible decision. So I don't know, but yeah, it's a fun way to make film, because you know that if what you're doing is dangerous, people will want to watch it.
There's definitely an interplay that goes on, I think, between you and I and the way we work too, and that I feel like we help and push and encourage one another to put on the blinders at certain points. I remember when we were shooting the first episode of that, you almost physically pushed me out of the car to get into the first car when I was hesitating. But we do a lot of planning beforehand is the thing, though. I'm thinking back on Penny Black, and we would sit down in these extensive planning sessions with Will, especially when we were doing stakeouts. We would sit down and map out every place that we could conceivably think harm would befall us, and we planned out a scenario to be able to handle that harm. So I wouldn't call us like reckless filmmakers. We're not like jumping in without thinking. We do a lot of thinking, and then we manage to very sufficiently turn our brains off when we actually have to approach that danger.
Yeah. You know, you talk about it. You got to let people know where they can find out Alex's need to go into strangers' cars.
Oh,
that's my therapist. I don't know.
No, it's well, you mean where can they find it?
Yeah, where can they find it online?
I think it's www.trafficshow.com, right? Thetrafficshow.com.
Yeah, we have thetrafficshow.com, and then it's also on Funny or Die makes the show, so it's funnyordie.com/thetrafficshow. If you Google the Traffic Show, you'll unfortunately see my face everywhere.
That's all right. That's we like seeing it, and that's why we're watching this video. They say that's their gift. I think they're very gifted filmmakers. It's Alexander Greer and Joe Saunders. We have been talking about The Penny Black. It's a documentary playing as part of NorthWestFest from Thursday, May 6th until Sunday, May 16th. You can stream it between those dates at, of course, NorthWestFest.ca. Alex, Joe, thank you so much for being our guests and talking to us about the film. I encourage people to check this out. It's a hell of a ride. So it's really exciting. And you know what? It kind of breaks that stereotype of people thinking like, oh, documentaries, festivals, much less films can be very stuffy. I'm like, this one is incredibly entertaining and fascinating. So congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
Thank you.